Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Boring AppSec podcast. In this episode, we are super excited to have Jonathan Cran with us. John has been a security industry veteran with more than 17 years of experience. He's had multiple roles with Rapid7. He was the CTO of Coney Express, which later got acquired by Outpost 24. He's a pioneer in the bug bounty industry, where he was in multiple roles with Bugcrowd. He was a VP of Operations, Advisor, and the Chief Product Officer. He was the head of research for Kenna Security, and he's also the founder of Intrigue that later got acquired into Mandiant, where he then served as a VP of Attack Surface Management. After Google acquired Mandiant, he became product and engineering leader at Google. And John is also a partner in Resilient Thesis, where they do early stage investments in security companies. Since the last 3 months, John has founded a stealth company in the Gen AI and cybersecurity space. I've personally known John since his bug crowd days when the bug bounty industry was just getting started. So it's amazing to see the industry morph into what it is now based on the efforts put in by the OGs like John and Casey. In this episode, we discuss John's extensive experience and insights into evolving landscape of cybersecurity, particularly focusing on AI agents, automation, and attack surface management. We explore the challenges of adopting AI in enterprises, the importance of context in risk scoring, and the future of software development in relation to security. John shares valuable advice for aspiring cybersecurity entrepreneurs, emphasizing the need to identify market problems and the significance of timing in addressing emerging threats. I hope you enjoy this conversation. John, super excited to have you. I know we don't have Sandesh here, but it's just going to be the two of us. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that introduction or anything that you want to speak on what you've been up to lately?
Yeah, it seems pretty comprehensive. I mean, I've been around the block, been in the security industry for a long time. The only thing I'll say is on the recent stuff, kind of everyone, including yourself, talking about AI agents, and so it got me really excited. It's the thing I wanted to work on, and so I took the leap back into startup about 3 months ago, and I've been building, in the agent space, trying to figure out what's going to happen there, and how to essentially build what amounts to agentic automation that helps security teams.
Yeah, so speaking about AI agents, I think let's get right into it because I've been experimenting with AI agents myself. I've seen a few other folks, experiment with AI agents. I actually spoke to a company last week where they were building, an army of agents, and these could be AppSec agents or cloud security agents. I mean, the whole world of AI agents seems to be very fascinating to me. Um, and since you've also sort of gone into this head first, I'm curious to know what has your experiences been so far, and where do you see how do you see this industry evolve into this AI agentic space?
Yeah, I think it's very early days. I'll say that. Looking at things like LangChain and LangGraph sitting on top of the foundation models. I mean, the first thing you realize is the foundation models were trained on, relatively speaking, old data, and so they're not current in terms of security information. And so an immediate problem to solve is just making sure that they have the latest intelligence and understanding of kind of what the threat is doing in order to be able to take the correct action. And so, I think, the interesting thing about me is what is an agent, right? Or about what we're working on. An agent essentially is an LLM or a foundation model with tool use. And so, what's a tool? Well, a tool can be an API, it can be a command line tool, it can be something that gives you input and output. And, when you just think about it in those terms, there's a lot of automation that can be made smarter with LLMs, with agents. And how do you build a tool? Well, a tool is just, it's like the description of whether to use that tool or not and what it gives you. So if you think about it, it's like you're giving control flow to the foundation model to make decisions about whether it needs additional information or not to be able to do a thing. And so with that in mind, the sky's sort of the limit in terms of automation. It's really just a question of like, can we make that automation smarter and more flexible by putting an LLM into the control flow? That's it. And so, I think there's lots of room to build and lots of opportunity, in literally every aspect of security, whether it be more in the detection and response side, where you're sort of like trying to decide, is this something that I need to pay attention to? Whether it's in the vulnerability, discovery or management space, where it's, something, should I pay attention to this? Should I fix it? What action should I take? Whether it's in the policy space where you're sort of generating and, coming up with, what are LLMs really good at? They're great at text. And so, some of the immediate problems are, just in the pure policy and GRC and text space. So,
Yeah.
yeah, lots of opportunity. It's the first time I think in a while I've been really, really excited about a particular technology being applicable to many parts of security.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you're right on. And based on some of my experiences with LLMs, so what I am also experimenting these days is can we make some of the boring, manual, cumbersome activities which an AppSec engineer would do, like threat modeling or design reviews. I know, like Sandesh, my co-host of this podcast, has started his own company on around threat modeling using AI. But I think based on my experimentation so far, I think one thing that is probably the biggest disadvantage or con, I would say, in uh, getting such technologies, adopted by big enterprises is consistency. And by
Yeah.
consistency, I mean, I run the same workflow multiple times and the output is different, right? So, do you have any ideas of how, or like, are you
How to
basically
address that?
solving this,
Yeah.
problem
Yeah.
space?
Yeah. I mean, I think the general consensus is the smaller and more focused you can make the particular task, the better. The more consistency you can build into it, the checks and balances. But like, as you think about a company that's built around Gen AI, you're really building around a model or, a set of models, and you want to be able to tie into the future growth of those models as they get better too. And as you put tools like RAGs or, GraphRag, whatever it may be, around the model to support its decision making, well, I mean, that's a double-edged sword, right? Like if the model gets better, you want the benefit of it. If the model gets worse, you want to know. And so how do you know? You build a very comprehensive and robust test suite around it. And that's it. There's no magic. I mean, like it's a
Yeah,
model, like it's meant to be, it's non-deterministic in some ways. And so I would say those two things together, build very discrete, very specific capabilities, augment it with, all the tooling that you need to, whether it's a RAG, graph RAG, whatever, and then ultimately build a test suite or a, benchmarking system that really helps you understand when things change or if you're not getting a very specific result. Yeah.
yeah, no, absolutely. So, no, that's actually a great point. So, following up with that, like since you are in this space where you are essentially building a product or a platform, I'm assuming to help enterprises solve some of their security problems. One question that I have was, so if you take a RAGs, right? Like I work for Lyft, right? So if I were to solve this security review problem using RAGs, it is doable for me. And in fact, I am in the process of doing so because we have all the best practices. We have all the uh, things that we want our engineers to follow, but these are all internal documents. So we can curate a RAG assistant using these sources, and then we
Yeah.
can, use LLMs to sort of ask it questions like, is this spec following the best practice or not, right? But for somebody external, like a security vendor who's trying to solve this problem for other enterprises, how do you solve that RAG use case where you don't have all the context, you don't have all the knowledge base of big enterprises, but you're still wanting to solve some of these problems? So do you have any idea of, or like, do you have thoughts around it?
Yeah, I mean, the immediate thought that comes to mind is like, why not provide some of that into the model or into a RAG? What's stopping the sharing of that information to a vendor? And maybe it's proprietary, maybe you can't.
Mhm.
And of course there are open source models and things like that that you can essentially build around. So is this I think the question becomes, is it an architectural question in terms of how you would build a product to do this? Or is it more of a question of like, what sort of security problems can be solved without company specific information? Like, I think those are kind
Yeah,
of different answers. Yeah.
I guess that's true. I guess I am maybe referring to the latter question, which is, application security. Since, I've been in AppSec for years, so I can speak more confidently on AppSec. But historically speaking, AppSec is a domain within the broader information security domain where it's just very difficult to automate things. Like, how do you automate design reviews? How do you automate triaging? How do you automate these things, right?
Yeah.
Di- I mean, different companies have their own frameworks of how they calculate severities and whatnot. But for a security vendor to solve it across all enterprises, it's a very difficult challenge, right? So that's what I was more hinting towards.
Got it. Okay, cool. Yeah. Thanks for the clarification. I mean, I guess what immediately came to mind for me is like, as AppSec engineers, I think for too long have been buried in vulnerabilities and sort of the very detailed specifics of application security. The architecture review, a higher level thing, but I think back to Google and this idea of like turbo launch. Like whenever you're going to
Hmm,
ship a new feature, you've got to essentially enter the information about what you're going to ship and tie it into the privacy doc and the data flow.
hmm,
And that's a very manual process. And it's great for the security team because they get some visibility of what's happening, but it requires the application builders to go in and essentially fill out this form. And it's like, can't we automate that? Like, can't we just
yeah,
start with these foundational problems, which are like, what is in this PR and what's the intent of the PR? And what are we actually trying to do here? And can we up level the conversation to like, that PR is actually making changes to the authentication provider. That's a big deal. We should look at that, as opposed to, oh, that's just adding more sources, or basically like something that doesn't matter. In fact, I was talking to
hmm,
this company last week, and they were doing just this as dry run security,
yeah,
and they essentially were having these conversations with their customers, and were saying like, "Hey, did you know that you swapped out 13 of your upstream providers over the course of the last few weeks in these PRs?" And the CISO's going, "No, actually,
wow,
I knew that initiative was there, but I didn't actually know that it was underway." And so maybe I think one way to think about this is to think less about let's solve the whole of the problem, and maybe let's focus on sort of like getting the level of the conversation and the level of the focus up to where we can focus on those things that really make a difference with regard to security, the authentication, authorization,
yeah.
things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
So
I think that's a great point. So basically, what we are referring to is breaking down the bigger sort of problem stream into smaller pieces like authentication, authorization, and if we can glean those insights from PR, so let's say, sort of like you mentioned, I think that's pretty powerful. So as a follow up to that question, do you think doing this using AI agents is a better approach versus, just kind of using function calling using OpenAI APIs? Like, how do you decide when to use agents and when to not use agents?
it's a good question. Yeah, I'll just try to think through my framework. You don't, agents could be more complex. And when we say agents, there's sort of like a spectrum of things, right? There's function calling, like you said, which is, just you shoot off a function to the model and it comes back and it tells you whether or not to execute that function.
Mhm.
There's agents where you've got, many different paths that it can take, and then, it needs to decide whether it's going to do that. And then there's kind of multi-agent. And I would say, start simple and move toward more complex as the problem gets more and more hairy.
Yeah.
Um, for uh, the particular problem we're working on right now is like taking threat intelligence, analyzing it, and turning it into knowledge, right? And what that means is like extracting out these interesting facts from the text and placing it into like an ontology.
Hmm.
And, like we can get a long way with just function calling. We don't need like a multi-agent, but then again, you start to go down this path of like, all right, this one's talking about, let's say, for example, using, the AWS APIs from an authenticated host, and we need to understand the tactics that it's using. Well, let's throw MITRE ATT&CK at it. Well, how does it
Mm.
know how to talk to MITRE ATT&CK? Well, shoot, we've got to like suck in MITRE ATT&CK and we've got to essentially like expose that to the agent or the model, right? And now all of a sudden you've turned it into an agent because you've
Yeah.
given it a tool that it can use to make better analysis of what's actually happening. And so that's kind of
Mm.
how it's worked for me, at least, is to start with something really simple. Shoot, start with prompts, like prompts are
Yeah.
great. And
Yeah.
then move toward agents over time. And then as you really need something where it's a more complex problem, now maybe you've got to have roles. You've got to have a CISO role, you've got to have a threat intelligence role, you've got to have an AppSec role, and they're focused with their own tools on their specific thing to be able to, up level the conversation within the problem.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's bang on, right? Like, uh, taking a framework, there's so many frameworks now, right? And if you can ideally train the multi-agent, whatever it is, to sort of have individual roles with their own specialties, I think that's pretty nice. I'm going to switch gears here slightly because I
Yeah.
think this is also an interesting sort of an aspect to consider. So the way I see this whole generative AI technology evolve is in basically two phases, right? Not phases, but two worlds. One is to use the technology to sort of scale um, security teams, right, or to solve security problems. And then
Yeah.
the other is to secure these initiatives themselves in companies, right? Like companies want to use Gen AI, but how to secure the
Right.
infrastructure, how to secure the different, sensitive information exfiltrating out and whatnot. So there are two different worlds, right? And I believe that we are still sort of figuring out how do we secure these Gen AI initiatives within enterprises. And then on the other hand, we have folks like you and me, we are sort of experimenting. Okay, how further can we go with these AI agents and solving security problems?
Yeah.
To be honest, I'm actually scared because I've actually seen some YouTube videos where there are folks building SaaS companies overnight using tools like Cursor AI and whatnot, right? So it has become so easy. And when I saw those videos, they were basically copy pasting SSH keys and doing these scary things, which I'm like, what are you doing? So
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on, like, should we continue experimenting with AI and sort of seeing how further we can go, or should we also stop and pay attention to, okay, how can we secure this stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. Good question. I would say, I'm of what's happening in my brain while you were speaking was, I was thinking about cloud, right? Like cloud is
Yeah,
a
yeah,
technology that we build upon and also we need to secure. And so it's very similar. It kind of runs similar parallels, right? Like not all of security needs to shift and go focus on model security or ML security or Gen AI security. But like a significant problem is there. You think about, something as basic as the model training and the process going along with it. Like what happens if we pull in a data set that has, sensitive information in it? Well, shoot, now we've actually got to think about how do we replace that model? How do we look at the downstream consumers of that model and make sure they didn't get any of the sensitive information? Do we have proper
mhm,
logging in place? So there's actually a lot of things to think about with regard to, AI security and how to deploy it securely and operationally run it securely. But at the same time, like it's a technology and like, we're kind of,
yeah, yeah.
actors. So let's go build upon it and see what's possible with it. So like I'm falling very much into this, let's see what's possible camp. Certainly I'm thinking about, like what happens? Can you prompt it to do crazy things? But like, I care a little bit less about that. I'm more interested in sort of like, what can it do at this point?
Mm.
And so these things can totally evolve in parallel. Like
Yeah,
they will,
yeah, it's pretty exciting, to be honest. On one hand, I constantly think about if a smart agent can do most of what I'm doing, but on the other hand, I'm like, yeah, people are doing the same thing, but they don't know what they're doing. So it's like,
Think about like 5 years, 10 years from now, right? Like I'm writing more code now that I've written in years, and I'm
yeah,
doing it at a faster pace. I'm able to push features out faster. And I mean, and that's not me, that's everybody, right? So in using Cursor is amazing. I talk to everybody about it. And
mm,
what's particularly interesting about Cursor is the fact that it rags your code base and it's just so much smarter than Copilot and, like just
yeah,
copy pasting between OpenAI. So anyway, like the point is a lot more software, right?
yes, Yeah.
and both secure software and insecure software. I mean, I think about like bug bounty as a kind of stupid example here, but like it just massively increased the spectrum of feedback, right? And so you have like really bad bug bounty submissions and you have really great bug bounty. So I'll tell you a story about a really great bug bounty submission in a second. But like,
Yeah.
you know, am I worried about my job? I don't know, man. Like, there's a need for more software. The economics of software are pretty insane, if you ask me. Like,
Mhm.
we can and should ship a lot more software, and there's a lot more possibility, and the software can get better. And so to go down that path for one more step, what happens in 10 years when we've got tons of software, way more, right? We have way more vulnerabilities, way
Yes.
more need to secure it, way more architecture reviews, like more. And so I'm not really worried about my job as a security person. What I would say is like I don't know if this is true or not, but it's my current thinking. Like, I mean, if there's one thing you should build right now, it's a automated remediation, AI assisted remediation company. Like, I mean, there's gonna be tons of these companies. There's gonna be tons of software, so like that's okay. Like that market's gonna be huge. I think it's way bigger than the finding vulnerabilities market.
Yeah.
It's the fixing and improving and sort of assisting software building market. I think it's going to be huge. So if you really wanted something to focus on, I would focus on that. And again, what do you start with? Well, you start with a wrapper around a model or an agent that
Yeah.
that tells you like, is this a good result or not? And then you just keep evolving that test suite. Uh, and so, okay, like the bug bounty thing. Just to switch to that for a second.
Uh-huh.
Like, I
Uh-huh.
remember, I wanted to tell you this story. Like,
Uh-huh.
remember very specifically the first time I decided bug bounty was really, really going to work, and like
Uh-huh.
this broad spectrum of results. You saw the clickjacking and sort of like stupid things that were happening. But I remember sitting with Casey actually on the way to San Francisco, and we were in a car, and somebody submitted a bug where they'd gone in, downloaded an image off AWS, reversed the image, figured out the daemon that was running on that particular container, and then figured out a bug in the container in order to pop a web app that was running that particular piece of software. And it's like, I mean, you see crazy things like agents doing stuff like shutting down
Uh-huh.
the container now, like we're starting to see
Yes.
agents do stuff like this, but it's
Yes.
very, very early days. And so, like that was when I knew like that was a very difficult result to get from automation. You couldn't really automate that at the time. So it was like,
Yeah.
okay, bug bounty is delivering these incredible, results. And at the same time, it comes with a lot of noise. And so we have to figure out how to sort of make that sustainable for companies. And so anyway, like to tie that back to AI, like
Yeah.
you'll have tons of bad software and tons of good software. And like security people have jobs forever.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I did see a tweet a while back saying that there was a CTF, and I think an AI agent was asked to hack that CTF, and it couldn't for some architecture reasons. So he just
Yeah.
went and got the flag. I don't know. It
It
was just, I don't know if you.
no, I saw it. It shut the Docker container down. It ran the
Yeah.
command outside the sort of like, so somehow it had execution on the Docker container itself, or the host of the container. And so it
Yeah.
literally just asked for the flag and it gave it back to it. So
Yeah.
to me, that's a sandboxing problem. Like it was
Mm.
poorly designed in the sense that somehow that model, and by the way, models don't run code, right? Like something that was prompting the model asked it what to do. The control flow came out of the model essentially saying like, yes, you should run this command. And so then the thing that ran the command ran it, got the flag, gave it to the model, and the model says, yes, we won. So
Yeah.
like, I just think that's a very important distinction because like, I don't know, it was like an aha moment for me when I realized, oh yeah, like, of course some model's not going to run code. Like that's crazy.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. No. Awesome. Okay. ASM. Let's talk about attack surface management for a bit. Again, if we go back in bug bounty days, right, like where reconnaissance was, I believe it was just becoming a big thing where people were building these, fancy platforms. I built one, I open sourced it, where we could
yeah,
basically
yeah,
run
yeah,
different scanners in different containers and whatnot.
yeah,
And it's just amazing to see how the ASM space has evolved over the years. Now there's ASP and the CSPM.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of curious to know, because you've had some pretty good roles at Google and different companies. You actually sold a company,
Yeah.
Intrigue, which was built around this whole concept.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on where this industry is going towards?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was. I remember seeing what you were doing and realizing, like, oh shoot, like I didn't think Kubernetes was really ready for this. That you could build
Yeah,
something that containerized that would scale like that. And so your building influenced my own and my thinking pretty early on. And so yeah, it's cool to see it evolve. Like,
yeah,
I guess just to give you, I'll give you a little bit of download on sort of like my context on this, and then I'll try to answer the question.
sure.
uh, Intrigue was, it started as an open core. I came out of Metasploit, learned how to write Ruby, got okay at building, and then took that, started an open source project called Intrigue. I called it Intrigue Core because I knew that was always the core of a SaaS platform. And, we kept building on that over the course of 10 years, really. It was an open source project that I just kind of, kept tacking on and off as I got, as I was doing too much management. I want to get back to technical. I just go and hack on it. And I know there were a ton of projects like this. And so, um, in 2020, things kind of shut down. I knew I wanted to build on this thing full time. So I raised a little bit of money. We turned it into a company and then turned it into a SaaS platform. And the big sort of aha moment for me was like when we did that, and I was able to bring on a designer and a UX person and another engineer working on front end. Like all of a sudden, it went from this sort of esoteric little tool to like it's an actual SaaS platform that's actually
Yeah,
kind of usable. And so that was a big like, oh wow, okay, cool, we can build this. And but it was always powered by that open core. And the thing we really focus on, if you think about like ASM companies, there's like the scanner DNA companies, and there's sort of the integration companies. Like the
mm,
folks that would pull results out of Shodan, Census, et cetera. And I wanted to build a scanner company, and we were kind of doing that, but ultimately our DNA was more of an integration engine. And so we
mm,
were really, really good at pivoting. We would take all the passive DNS and pivot that into IPs, and then pivot that into networks, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, we sold it to Mandiant, integrated it into the Mandiant Advantage platform. Mandiant got sold to Google, integrated it into Google Threat Intelligence. And that was actually the last thing I did was to get it integrated into Google Threat Intelligence, working with the VirusTotal guys, working with the sort of internal Google teams, getting it integrated into the Threat Intelligence platform. Yeah, it was nice. But I wanted to get back to building. And I looked at the ASM space, and I'll say what's happening here is like, there's a bunch of gaps. I would say there's still plenty of room to build there. But if you look at the analysts, what they're doing is they're saying, okay, CASM, which is
yeah,
cyber asset attack surface management, which is more like that integration oriented DNA, is integrating in these EASM companies, the external sort of scanner companies, and you're wanting to have a unified posture. If you're a CISO, you don't need
yeah,
50 different places to kind of figure out what's vulnerable. You would ideally have one or two, maybe three, as you think about app, cloud, and sort of like traditional. And so that's one major trend I would say is, and we've seen this coming for a couple of years, like this idea of like the unified posture management. And like you said, there's cloud posture management, app posture management, et cetera. You'll see those kind of converge, but it's, by nature, it's a little hard to converge completely.
yeah,
And so I think it'll still remain a little bit of fragmented for a while. As far as like pure tech, like where's our IPv6 visibility? Like there's a couple ASM companies that have some visibility, mainly based on DNS. Where's our deep app visibility? Like Shodan's great, but like it's all host based. You hit a
yeah,
host on app.company.com versus 1.1.1.1 or whatever, and you get totally different answers. And like any bug bounty, person knows this, but like I don't think the average CISO would be able to say like what are they missing in terms of visibility, because they can't, like the ASM companies aren't doing a great job at app. Psychognito's starting to do cool stuff there.
huh,
Uh, certainly we were doing a lot of cool stuff at the app layer, but like it's arbitrarily deep to a degree too, right? Like you think about everything that's getting built in JavaScript on top of these APIs. And you think about how many undocumented APIs are out there too. Like how many devs have shipped something where they've got the, internal endpoints that are actually, they're exposed directly to the internet. They just never documented them. I think that's very, very common.
yeah,
Um, And so, yeah, I don't, I mean, if you think about the future, app is like a major area of attack surface, data, right? App and data and cloud, like that's kind of where everybody's building these days. And so, I would focus on those areas in terms of attack surface management.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. No, it's good to hear from folks like yourself who've actually built and sold companies in this space. I've also spoken to a bunch of people who are still trying to experiment and figure out what is the product market fit for an ASM like tool. I've seen some products where all they're doing is, building a platform on top of APIs like Shodan API and all of these open source APIs and open source tools. And I'm like, yeah, like companies can build this themselves. Like, how exactly are you providing value? So yeah, it's and like there's so many vendors these days, and with LLMs, it has become even more easy now to
I
spin up
wonder,
something like this.
yeah, I wonder if agents sort of overtake that use case. I
Yeah,
don't know. I haven't thought a lot about this, to be honest with you. Like, let's just brainstorm for a second. Like, if
sure,
you
let's do it.
if you can have an agent that speaks to Showdown and speaks to Census and speaks to Nmap, whatever, and then
Yeah,
like, do you need to build a SaaS platform? Well, I mean, you kind of still need to collect the data, right? Like, uh, and so is how much? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's interesting.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. It's like you basically need individual agents to do this consolidation of data from different tools, and then you need like a some kind of an orchestrator agent that takes in the data that has the context and knowledge base of how an organization calculates the risk and whatnot, and then it
yes,
applies its brain to it, right? That's, I think, is where the real value is, right? Because see these different scores which most of these vendors have, right, against individual like SaaS findings. Like for example, um, there's a potential SQL injection vulnerability in some file in some repository, and the risk score for this vulnerability is 100. I'm like, how did you come up with this risk score? What context do you have? How do you even know, right? So I think that is a big problem, right? Because if you go to CISOs and like executives, they care about how much a risk a particular application is bringing to the organization. So for them to see that risk score, it's like, yes, I know the risk score, but in reality, if you speak to practitioners like myself, I'm like, that risk score means
yeah.
nothing. It's useless, right? So I really believe, agents could be made. And again, when I think about it, I'm thinking, are we over engineering here? Do we really need agents? Can we do away with something much lightweight? I
What's
don't
an
know.
but yeah, what's an agent? Again, it's tool use and an LLM, right? Like one kind of crazy idea, like why can't you plug into Confluence and download the documentation associated with a
Yeah,
particular organization's applications? Like that context is
you could do
impossible
that.
to get
Yeah,
for old vendors, like for folks who weren't doing that. And you need an LLM to really understand it, structure the data, try to basically get it to a point where you can do something with it, do math on it.
yeah.
And so, like, as an example of something that's now possible that used to be really hard,
Uh,
that's one. Yeah, but that idea of context, I think, is really key to risk scoring. And so, and by the way, like, just a plug for the EPSS, folks, like,
yeah.
that's the. I mean, if you look at how to do technical threat risk, like that feels like the right direction, right? Like it was spun out of Kenna, and those guys are working on something awesome now. And essentially what it is like detections of exploitation in the wild, and take that. Now you have an understanding of what is being actively exploited in the wild because you've got literally the raw data, which comes off like IDS systems, comes off like malware reversing, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, cool. So we have this. Well, we know which vulnerabilities are actively being exploited in the wild, but what we really want to know is like what's about to be exploited in the wild. So what it is a model that looks at all this exploitation data and then applies that to new vulnerabilities. And so, okay, which new vulnerabilities they look very similar. And when you say look very similar, it's like you have to look at the text you have available for that vulnerability to be able to say, yes, this thing looks very much like, CVE 2023 1234. okay, cool. This is likely to be exploited because it's so similar. And
Huh.
so that's great when you have CVEs, but what if you don't have CVEs?
Yeah.
Like, what do you do? What's the outcome measure for the model? And so, so many of these custom vulnerability, custom app vulnerabilities, there is no outcome measure that's standardized, right? Like bug bounty
Yeah.
is the closest approximation we have to what is at scale, at least, what is actively being exploited in the wild with regard to vulnerabilities. And so if we can take that bug bounty data, train a model on that to say, okay, what looks like this? What vulnerabilities look like this? I mean, that's really what's happening in your head and my head, right? Like
Yeah.
we look at a vulnerability, we're like, that actually looks like this thing that happened last week, except our sample size is way too small, So
Yeah.
how do we get those samples, at a global view and then start to train models on it? Well, I think you have to use bug bounty I can't think of any other
Data.
source that's like value, at scale enough. So anyway,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's actually a great conversation topic which we could go on for hours. But I will say that I think there is so much value in bug bounty data because you have real exploitability, requests and responses, right? And this concept of eliminating vulnerability classes, I think there's, recently saw it was either CISA or some major organization, they came up with secure by design, like framework, which they want companies to adopt. And how do you do that? You have to eliminate vulnerability classes. How do you
yes,
eliminate classes altogether? You have to take the data that you have on exploitability and then try to glean some insights upon, okay, these are the common classes that affect your organization, right? And then how do you go and solve that, right? So, yeah, it almost feels like you need a bunch of data and insights from various tools, from various, like SAST, DAST, what have you. And then you provide all of that into some kind of an AI model or an agent that can get the context out of it and then apply that onto anything new that comes up, right?
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Get,
that
get
makes
it,
a lot
get
of sense.
fixed in the frameworks or get it fixed in the infrastructure and the design.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard to get that the actual exploitation data, right? Like
yes,
it's easy to find vulnerabilities. It's very difficult to, sort of capture this was attempted to be exploited. And then how do you tie those two things together? Like this vulnerability resulted in this exploitation. Like you need the full chain.
yes, you
Yeah.
need the full chain. Yeah, yeah. Awesome. Okay. I have a few more things, and I know we are getting close to a time. So, let's switch gears slightly. And so, you've sold Intrigue. You've worked at Google, and bunch of other companies. Uh, do you have any, like, based on your experiences, right? Starting a company, you've started your own company now. What advice do you have for cybersecurity entrepreneurs, right, who are looking to start something in this age where AI is the thing? It's so easy to spin up companies and whatnot. Do you have, based on your experiences, what would you like to share?
Yeah, it's a good question. Kind of just stuff that comes top to mind. Like the experienced entrepreneurs that I've looked at, they tend to start with a market problem versus starting with the technology. I think that's and I struggle with this one myself because I want to play with the technology.
Uh-huh.
And so if you want to shortcut it, and you don't always want to shortcut it, right? Like sometimes it's okay to just go play with the technology. But if you really want to shortcut it and build something, I would start with the problem, right? And I would try to find the problem based on conversations with folks, but I would also try to be a little bit smarter about that. Like, what threats are starting to emerge today that are likely to be a real problem in a couple years? You want to be ahead of the problem. You don't want to be too early because like too early is the same as just missing it altogether. Nobody is able to give you any money because they don't actually know that it's a real problem or like it's not a priority for them. So you kind of want to time it a little bit. And the
Yeah,
way I tend to do that is to go look at like what are the breaches that are getting a lot of attention now, and then try to go backward in time. Like how did that trend happen? And just
yeah,
start thinking about like what innovative threat actors are doing today. So that's like more ideation, kind of like
yeah,
you got to be open to building what the market needs.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I think you might be referring to things like a Log4Shell or a SolarWinds, right? Like these are some major things that affected pretty much the entire world, right? Like
yes.
recently CrowdStrike having that blue screen of death, right? For people who use Microsoft. I mean, yeah, like if you just think about it, the impact it had based on like maybe a single line of code, it's crazy, right? So,
Yes.
uh,
The
yeah,
X
like,
library, right? Like,
yeah,
how do we protect against this stuff?
right.
Yeah, so those it's funny how like those things get embedded in your brain, right? Like there's a couple breaches a year that really stick out. I mean, I think back to
Uh,
2017 Equifax breach,
uh,
2023 Move It hack, the exchange hacks in 2021. You know, like they're just in there because it's in the public consciousness, and so those are good signals that there's a major problem. You're probably a little bit late at that point if you're building for that particular problem. You know, you want to kind of time it to where that major problem happens when you're ready for it, and that's when you're like really timing the market.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. So how do you actually keep up with all of these latest discoveries? Like, do you have I don't know, like your own way framework of how do you ideate essentially?
yeah, yeah, I would say like two things I'll say here. One is Mallory. That's kind of what we're doing with the startup is like trying to suck in all this threat intelligence and get a little bit ahead of what's actually happening.
Okay.
And I'll talk more about that in the future. Like, it's
Yeah,
still
yeah, yeah,
really early.
yeah.
But I use, I'll just plug Obsidian for a second here. I use the heck out of Obsidian and I try to
Uh,
keep track of who's doing interesting stuff, what breaches are happening, what threat actors are doing. And the nice thing about Obsidian is like, it gives you this sort of like personal wiki concept where you can just link things and you
uh,
end up getting this, they call it serendipity, right? Like this where you're writing about something, you're like, oh shoot, yeah, actually, I did write about that a couple of years ago. I totally forgot about that.
uh,
And so by doing that and having a decent, sort of like personal organization system or personal wiki, you end up with this serendipity and kind of like these ideas that start to meld together. And so like the whole Austin security community is using it now. Like we're all building sort of automation on top of Obsidian
wow.
and kind of sharing ideas. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And
That's
even last thing I'll say, even building automation around it. For instance, like if you want to know what a company is doing, it should just go take the pages for that company, throw them into an LLM, and get back an Obsidian page, similar to Daniel Miessler's
right,
Fabric,
sure.
right? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I
and
love
and
fabric.
yeah, same. I love the concept of it, especially. Like one thing you realize pretty quickly is like the superpower of being able to use an LLM is a prompt manager.
It's
So
all in the
like,
prompt, yeah.
yeah, it's in the prompt, and there's neat stuff happening like DSpy and sort of like programming prompts and things like that. But we're still so early that the prompt really matters. And so, I would say like build your own prompts with regard to the problem you're trying to solve. If you're trying to build a company, like be
Uh,
building prompts that help you do that. Like what is this company doing? What's interesting about this VC, or who is this VC invested in? Things like that, are really helpful to speed you up. Um, and then last thing I'll say, like I do angel invest now, and so the sophisticated angel investors, they'll have a rubric. They'll say like this entrepreneur 1 to 3. Is it a first time entrepreneur who's never built anything? Is it a multi-time entrepreneur who's built a bunch of stuff? Like, okay, that's a 3 because they're a multi-time, right? Like they're going through and
okay.
actually grading out, on team, on problem, on how far along are they, et cetera. And you'll get a score that
Uh,
basically, says whether you're going to invest or not as a VC. I'm a little less sophisticated than that. I'm not going to lie. Team, timing, traction, right? Like good team, is their market timing pretty good? Like, is the problem really a problem, or are they too early? Are they too late? And then traction, how many design partners do they have? How many customers do they have? That sort of thing. So, as you think about, if you want to go build a company, be thinking about team, timing, and traction. How will you appear to those investors? How can you make yourself? And in the end, every investor, all they want to do is de-risk the investment.
yeah.
Like, how do we make this less risky? Well, you probably need, if you've got a sales focused entrepreneur, but no engineer, well, that's pretty risky because like, what are they going to be able to build? And
Uh,
so, be thinking about those. Yeah.
awesome. Yeah. I think that pretty much wraps everything I had for you, John. I don't know if you have any last thoughts that you want to share with whoever might be listening to this conversation. I have actually learned quite a bit already, so I
Cool.
really appreciate this conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I mean, I feel like we could talk for 4 hours, like
Yeah.
we won't subject people to that, but like, I
Yeah.
feel like we got to do this, online or offline
Yeah.
again. So
More
thanks.
frequently. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for the
Yeah.
time.
Awesome. Thank you for coming, John. And yeah, I hope you have a good day.
Sounds good. Talk soon.
Thank you for joining us. If you like the show, please share this with your friends and colleagues. If you have any questions or comments, you can reach Anshuman on Twitter at Anshuman_BH. That's ANSHUMAN_BH. And me, Sandesh, at Juba on Jeans. That's JUBBAONJEANS. See you next time.